The rain had started just after sunset, soft at first, then steady, the kind that wrapped the streets in a silver blur. Ana de Armas stood under the awning of a small train station on the outskirts of the city. Her suitcase leaned against her leg, its wheels wet from the walk she had taken to get here. Trains had been delayed for over an hour. The crowd had thinned, people calling cabs or deciding to wait it out somewhere warm. She was almost alone when she heard the sound of slow, measured footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Keanu Reeves, hands in his jacket pockets, dark hair damp at the edges, walking toward her with the same calm expression he always seemed to carry. She had met him before, once on set, once at a charity dinner, but only in passing. Still, there was something in the way he looked at her now, not as an actor to another, but as one person noticing another standing in the cold. "You're still here," he said, his voice quiet under the sound of the rain hitting the tin roof above. "Yeah," Ana replied, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. "The train's late." "Mine too," he said. Then, after a pause, "You could head inside. It's warmer in there." She shook her head. "If I go inside, I might miss the announcement. And I just feel better staying out here." Keanu looked at her for a moment, then stepped closer until they were both standing just inside the shelter. He didn't try to convince her again. Instead, he simply stood there, his presence steady, as if he had silently decided that if she was going to wait out here, then he would too. Time passed slowly. The rain picked up, drumming harder against the roof. Ana noticed that the others who had been waiting outside eventually drifted off. One by one, they disappeared into the station or down the wet streets until it was just the two of them. "You don't have to stay," she said at last, turning to him. "I'm fine. Really." He gave a small smile. "I know, but no one likes waiting alone in the rain." Her chest tightened a little at the words, though she couldn't explain why. There was no grand gesture here, no dramatic rescue, just a quiet choice, one that said more than most words could. Then, just as they thought the announcement would never come, the speakers crackled to life. The next train was still delayed, another 30 minutes at least. Ana sighed, her breath misting in the cold air. Keanu glanced at her suitcase. "Long trip?" She nodded. "Meeting family. Haven't seen them in a while." "Good reason to be patient, then," he said, and there was something about the way he said it, slow, deliberate, that made her feel like he wasn't just talking about trains. Minutes turned into another half hour, but neither moved. The rain outside the shelter turned the street into a mirror, reflecting the glow of the lone streetlight. They didn't speak much, but every so often their eyes met, and there was an unspoken understanding in the quiet. Finally, a faint light appeared in the distance. The train, creeping toward the station. The small group of passengers inside the waiting room began to filter back outside. Keanu stepped aside, letting them pass, but stayed near her. As the train rolled in, its brakes squealing, Ana turned to him. "Thank you for staying." He shrugged lightly, as if it was nothing. Sometimes the smallest things matter most. They stepped onto the train together, finding seats across the aisle. The moment could have ended there, just a shared wait in the rain. But for both of them, something about that night felt like the beginning of a story neither had expected. The train rattled forward through the rain, its windows streaked with silver lines. Outside, the city lights blurred into soft shapes, glowing faintly against the wet darkness. Inside, the air was warmer, but quiet. Most passengers kept to themselves, their eyes on phones or the dim aisle floor. Ana sat by the window, watching droplets race each other down the glass. She thought she would feel relief now that she was on her way, but instead she felt an odd stillness, like the night had changed something, though she didn't know what. Across the aisle, Keanu sat with his hands resting loosely in his lap, gaze steady out the opposite window. Every now and then their eyes met without meaning to. It wasn't awkward. It was just there, like the rhythm of the train itself. After a few minutes, he leaned slightly toward her. "How far are you going?" "2 stops past the main terminal," she said. "It's closer to my cousin's place." He nodded. "I'm getting off at the terminal, but that's fine. I wasn't in a hurry." She tilted her head. "You weren't in a hurry earlier either. You could have taken a cab and left." Keanu smiled faintly. "And miss the rain?" His tone was light, but there was something in his eyes that made her think he wasn't joking entirely. A brief silence followed, broken only by the train's wheels clattering over the tracks. Anna's mind drifted to the last time someone had simply chosen to stay with her without wanting anything in return. It had been years. Too many. "You said you're going to see family," Keanu said after a while. "Long time since you last visited?" "Almost 3 years," she admitted. "Work, life, and maybe a bit of fear. Sometimes you put off things you shouldn't." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know that one." There was weight behind his words, but he didn't explain. Anna didn't push. Instead, she said, "What about you? Why were you at that station in the first place?" He thought for a moment before answering. "I'd been at a small benefit event nearby. When it ended, I just didn't feel like rushing back. Sometimes I take the long way, even if it's harder." "You like making things harder for yourself?" she asked with a faint smile. "Maybe I just don't like shortcuts," he replied, and this time his voice was quiet enough that she almost didn't hear it. The train slowed for the next stop. A few people got off, umbrellas ready. Rain still fell outside, steady as before. As the train moved again, Anna realized something. Keanu didn't talk like someone trying to fill silence. He let quiet moments stay quiet, but when he spoke, it felt like each word was placed carefully. It made her want to listen. "Do you travel like this a lot?" she asked. "Not really," he said. "But sometimes, if you keep your plans too tight, you miss the people you're supposed to meet." She blinked at that. "Do you mean me?" He didn't look away from the window, but the corner of his mouth lifted. "Maybe." Her pulse quickened just a little, not in the way of sudden attraction, but in the way of realizing that a stranger might see you more clearly than people who have known you for years. The night outside darkened further as the train crossed a stretch of open land. The sound of the rain on the roof softened, and the only light came from the warm glow of the carriage lamps. Anna leaned back in her seat, but she didn't close her eyes. For some reason, she didn't want to miss a single moment. The train pulled into the main terminal with a slow groan, its brakes hissing as it came to a stop. The platform outside glowed under harsh overhead lights, and the rain, though softer now, still traced silver lines across the pavement. Most passengers gathered their things quickly, eager to get home. Keanu stood, picking up his worn leather bag, but didn't rush toward the door. Anna stayed in her seat, watching as people filed out into the damp air. "This is my stop," he said, glancing toward the open doors. "Yeah," she replied, her voice quieter than she expected. She thought he'd give her a quick nod and step out. But instead, he stayed where he was, the way he had stayed at the station earlier, unmoving, like he was waiting for something. "Your stop's still ahead, right?" he asked. "2 more," she said. He looked down the emptying aisle, then back at her. "Mind if I ride with you?" The question caught her off guard. "You don't need to. You're already here." "I know," he said, "but I figure if the night's been this quiet, we might as well let it keep going." Her lips curved, not into a smile exactly, but something softer. "Sure." They stayed seated as the train emptied until only a handful of passengers remained. The doors closed and the carriage lurched forward again, Outside, the city began to fade into smaller streets and darker stretches of track. "So," she said after a moment, "why did you really stay at the station earlier? I mean, you didn't know me? You didn't owe me anything." He considered that for a while before answering. "Years ago, I was in an airport. My flight got delayed for hours. There was this older man sitting nearby, traveling alone. Most people ignored him, but one woman, a stranger, sat with him the whole time, talking and listening like it mattered. When the flight finally boarded, he told her, 'You made the waiting easy.'" Anna tilted her head. "So you remembered that?" "I remembered how it felt to watch someone choose to stay. Figured maybe one day I'd get the chance to do the same." She let the thought sink in. There was something rare about that kind of memory. Not a grand event, but a quiet kindness someone decides to carry forward. The train slowed for the next stop. The rain outside had eased into a fine mist, and the world beyond the glass felt still, almost paused. As they pulled away again, Anna noticed the way Keanu kept glancing out into the dark, like he was measuring the night itself. "What if you miss your way home?" she asked. "Then I guess I'll just find another way," he said simply. Her heart tightened at that. It wasn't about the train anymore. It was about choosing to be present, even if it meant taking the longer road. A few minutes later, her stop approached. She reached for her suitcase, and he stood as well. "This is you," he said. "Yeah." She hesitated, then added, "But you don't have to get off here." He shook his head lightly. "I know." And yet, when the train doors opened, he stepped out beside her. The platform was almost empty, the sound of rain now just a faint hiss in the distance. "You really didn't have to," she said again. "Maybe not," he replied. "But no one should step off into the night alone if they don't have to." The platform was dimly lit, the glow from the overhead lamps pooling in soft circles on the wet ground. The rain had nearly stopped, leaving the air cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of earth and metal from the tracks. Anna adjusted the handle of her suitcase, feeling the uneven texture of the worn grip under her fingers. Keanu stood beside her, hands in his jacket pockets, looking down the empty stretch of the platform as if measuring the quiet before they stepped into it. "How far is your cousin's place?" he asked. "About a 15-minute walk," she said. "Normally I'd take a cab, but it's a small town. Not many around this late." 15 minutes isn't bad," he replied, glancing toward the narrow path that led away from the station. "Mind if I walk you there?" She shook her head with a small smile. "You really don't give up, do you?" He chuckled softly. "Just making sure you get where you're going." They began walking, the wheels of her suitcase clicking over the uneven pavement. The town felt like it was asleep. Shuttered shop windows lined the street, their displays faintly visible under the glow of dim security lights. The only sound was their footsteps and the faint drip of water from awnings. "It's strange," Anna said after a few minutes. "You meet so many people in life, and most of them are in a hurry to leave. But you keep staying." Keanu didn't answer right away. "Maybe I've learned that sometimes staying is the only thing that matters, even if it's just for one night." There was something about his tone, steady, unhurried, that made her wonder what moments in his life had taught him that lesson. She didn't ask. Instead, she let the quiet settle between them again. As they passed under another street lamp, the light fell over his face, and she noticed the fine lines at the edges of his eyes, the way they seemed to carry both kindness and weight. He didn't look like someone just walking beside her out of politeness. He looked like someone who had decided that being here was exactly where he wanted to be. "You know," she said lightly, "most people would think this is strange. Two people who barely know each other walking through a town in the middle of the night." "Maybe it is strange," he admitted, "but that doesn't make it wrong." The road narrowed, leading them past a row of old houses with deep porches and dark windows. Anna could almost hear the faint hum of life inside. Families asleep, pets shifting in their beds, the slow rhythm of a place that didn't need to stay awake past midnight. Halfway down the street, her suitcase wheel caught on a crack in the pavement. She stopped, bending to free it. Keanu was beside her in an instant, holding the handle steady while she adjusted the angle. "Thanks," she murmured. "No problem," he said, but the way he said it wasn't casual. It felt like another layer of the same quiet care he'd been showing all night. When they reached a corner, a faint light glowed ahead, her cousin's street. "Almost there," she said. Keanu slowed his pace slightly. "Then let's not rush it." They walked the last stretch in easy silence, the kind that didn't feel like something missing, but something whole. As they reached the small gate in front of a modest, warmly lit house, she stopped. "This is me," she said, turning to face him. "I mean it. Thank you. For staying." He gave a small nod. "Glad I did." She opened the gate, stepped inside, and turned back to see him still standing there, hands in his pockets, watching to make sure she made it to the door. Only when she was safely inside did he turn and start back down the street. Morning came with pale sunlight breaking through the thin curtains of Anna's guest room. The rain from the night before had washed the streets clean, leaving the air fresh and cool. She lay still for a moment, replaying the quiet walk with Keanu in her mind. The sound of his footsteps beside hers, the way he'd stood at the gate until she was safely inside. She hadn't expected to see him again. Their meeting had felt like one of those rare moments that lived and died in a single night. Beautiful because it couldn't be repeated. But just after lunch, her phone buzzed with a message from her cousin. "You left your scarf at the station last night. They said someone found it and brought it to Lost and Found." She frowned. She hadn't even noticed it was missing. After a quick thank you, she decided to walk back to the station. The town looked different in the daylight. Shops open, people chatting on sidewalks, the smell of fresh bread drifting from a nearby bakery. She reached the station and stepped inside, expecting nothing more than to pick up her scarf and leave. But there he was. Keanu, leaning casually against the counter of the small Lost and Found desk, the very scarf she'd lost folded neatly in his hands. "You," she said, more surprised than she meant to sound. "Me," he replied with a faint smile. "You left this behind last night. Figured I'd drop it off, but then thought maybe I should wait and see if you came for it." "You could have just left it," she said. But the truth was, she was glad he hadn't. "Maybe," he said, "but sometimes it's better to hand something back in person." She took the scarf from him, fingers brushing his briefly. "Thank you." "No problem," he said, glancing toward the empty platform outside. "You walking back?" She hesitated. "Yeah, it's not far." "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She let out a small laugh. "You really are consistent." They left the station together, the sun now high enough to warm their shoulders. This time the walk felt lighter, easier. Without the rain or the late-night quiet, they could notice more. The bright flowers blooming in front of a corner shop, the old man feeding pigeons by the fountain, the distant hum of traffic from the main road. "So," she asked as they passed under a row of leafy trees, "what's your plan now? Still taking the long way?" "Maybe," he said, "but I think sometimes the long way isn't about where you're going. It's about who you end up walking with." She glanced at him, and for a moment, neither of them looked away. When they reached her cousin's street again, they slowed at the corner, as if both were reluctant for the walk to end. "Are you leaving town today?" she asked. "Not until tomorrow morning," he replied. "No fixed schedule." She considered that, then said, "There's a small cafe near here, if you're not busy later." "I'm not," he said before she could finish. "Good," she said with a small smile. "Then maybe the long way can wait until tomorrow." The cafe sat on the corner of a quiet street, its front window framed by small pots of lavender and rosemary. The afternoon light spilled in soft gold across the worn wooden tables inside. When Anna pushed open the door, the bell above it chimed gently. Keanu was already there, seated near the window, a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment it felt like the room itself slowed down. "You're early," she said, smiling as she took the seat across from him. "Old habit," he replied. "Gives me time to watch the world go by." They ordered tea for her and a pastry to share. Conversation began easily, flowing between light topics and heavier ones without either of them forcing it. They spoke about work, about the places they'd been, about the moments in life when you choose to slow down instead of rushing forward. At one point, Anna leaned back and studied him. "Do you always do this?" "Do what?" he asked. "Stay. Wait. Walk with people you've just met." He thought for a moment, fingers resting on the edge of his coffee cup. "Not always. But sometimes you meet someone, and you know you're meant to be part of their story, if only for a chapter." She let the words linger in the air, feeling them settle somewhere deep inside her. And what if that chapter doesn't end quickly? "Then," he said softly, "maybe it's not just a chapter." Outside, the sun began to lower, painting the street in amber light. The cafe grew quieter as the few other customers drifted out. Anna glanced toward the door, then back at him. "You leave tomorrow, right?" "That's the plan," he said. "But plans change." The way he said it wasn't careless. It was open, like he was willing to let the road be rewritten. They left the cafe together, walking the long way back toward her cousin's street. The shadows stretched across the pavement, and the air was warm now, carrying the faint scent of flowers from nearby gardens. When they reached her gate, they stopped, just as they had the night before. "Thank you," she said again, and this time her voice carried more than gratitude for a scarf or a walk. He nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "For what?" "For reminding me that not everyone's in a hurry to leave," she said. He stood there for a moment, then said quietly, "I think I'll take the morning train the day after tomorrow." She smiled, understanding without needing to ask why. He stepped back onto the path, giving her one last look before turning away. She watched until he disappeared around the corner, her heart lighter than it had been in years. That night, she lay awake for a long time, listening to the quiet of the small town. The rain was gone, but the feeling from that first night remained, a steady warmth that stayed with her long after the door had closed.